Hello everyone and welcome to another build in progress guide video for absolute beginners of Path of Exile. I'm your host Gyro and I encourage you to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy this content and don't want to miss out on any future episodes and new builds. Today we are talking about Storm Rain Ranger, Deadeye Ascendancy specifically. Storm Rain is a new skill added to Path of Exile in the Expedition League 3.15. It's a pretty fun looking lightning AoE attack, where you fire volleys of arrows into the sky and then they land and start firing lightning beams between themselves, forming this electrified grid or field that damages any enemies that are caught inside of it. I think that general opinion around Path of Exile build creator community at the moment of me creating this video is that Storm Rain generally feels a little underpowered, making it not great against thicker and tougher enemies such as bosses, especially if they have elemental resistances. This might result in Storm Rain being buffed in the future, but while we are assessing the potential of such a beginner-friendly casual build right now, let me straight away summarize all the pros and cons for you. Pros are pretty obvious. Storm Rain is a new and really fun skill. It's good for those who like bow-based AoE ranged attack gameplay, such as Rain of Arrows or Toxic Rain, as the two most well-known ones that would feel very similar to this Storm Rain gameplay type. The build is actually quite effective at general map clearing and killing groups of smaller mobs in the Expedition League, unearthed undead encounters pretty well too. It also allows you to shift your build and gearing focus to anything that boosts elemental damage, specifically lightning damage, rather than our usual ranged damage over time components such as bleeds, chaos and poison. Cons are rather plentiful, but in my opinion should not stop you from trying out this build for yourself because the fun factor remains quite high. Storm Rain itself doesn't output enough damage, at least at my level range around level 60, to bring down tougher single targets like bosses pretty quickly. I partly mitigated this problem by relying on the second skill of this build, Shrapnel Ballista, which is like a shotgun in my pocket that I pull out when extra damage in the face of some boss or tougher enemy is required. In all honesty though, I'm using Shrapnel Ballista almost on every pull, because it became a habit and makes clearing maps a little more straightforward. Another natural con associated with majority of ranger builds is that they are quite low on life and fairly squishy. Direct hits are mitigated quite well though by very high evasion rating from gear and passive skill tree choices that we will discuss in a few minutes. The biggest issue that I'm seeing so far is that I have to make those hard choices between survivability, such as boosting my evasion rating further, versus damage output, such as putting extra points into the variety of damage increases for bows. We have plenty of those passive skill tree nodes available to us. All in all, I do enjoy this build a lot, and I enjoy it a lot more than my Rain of Arrows or even Toxic Rain Ranger for that matter, somehow maybe due to Storm Rain being new, or just because I've balanced this build better so far, I do not know yet, and I'll let you try it out for yourselves and be the judge. So let's jump straight into talking about key gems and some of my early gearing choices. Storm Rain as a skill becomes available to you around level 28. So you'll need to level with something else until that point. You could rely on something like Galvanic Arrow early on, which is a lightning-based skill and would allow you to plan your lightning damage output straight away, as you try and scrape the right gear together, or you could just go with something as simple as Rain of Arrows, which would offer you a similar gameplay to the Storm Rain, just without the elemental damage component. It really is up to you. Leveling a ranger and pelting enemies with arrows from a distance while running around them and being quite mobile on your feet is not the hardest exercise there in the game, at least in the Expedition League 3.15. Just try and compare it to leveling any of the melee classes and you'll know what I mean. Shrapnel Ballista Totem comes your way as a skill very early on too, and you should start using it to make your life easier without a doubt. You'll also need to keep relying on those totems for boss encounters later in the game, so it would be a good practice and a chance to level up those gems. Once you get Storm Rain, you'll obviously start using it. Problem of this build is that being a ranger, you are not really positioned closely to any of the elemental damage boosting nodes on the passive skill tree, other than maybe Shocking Strikes. That we'll take a look at closely very soon, and you'll obviously need to take that skill. As I said already, this is a build in progress. Going quite nicely for me so far, around level 60 right now, so what you see here is far from being optimized. Let's get that obvious thing out of the way. There are only two key gem clusters that I have and need to draw your attention to. It's the Storm Rain cluster itself, where the gem is supported by Mirage Archer, our bread and butter imaginary friend that any Deadeye ranger can't live without. Faster attack support, duh. And in my limited gem socket situation, increased area of effect support that helps lightning surges travel slightly faster, or at the very least that's my current theory. Second gem cluster for me is Shrapnel Ballista. It is supported by lesser multiple projectiles gem, volley support, and additional accuracy, which you could absolutely replace by a whole ton of other things. You should probably use your imagination here and rely on the color of your available gem sockets for your second cluster. I also use Summon Ice Golem to give me extra accuracy and critical chance, supported by lesser multiple projectiles and added lightning damage support, but you could arguably swap the increased area of effect support with this increased lightning damage support gem in the Storm Rain cluster. I am still experimenting with this build, so I'm really open to your suggestions, and you're free to experiment however you like and see what works better for you. For movement, I use currently unsupported Dash gem that I'll probably back up with Second Wind support when I can get a chance to do that and can be bothered, in all honesty. I also use Flesh and Stone defensive aura, running around obviously in a sand stance to further protect myself from the mobs trying to bash me in the face. For gear, you'll obviously take anything that's boosting lightning damage, evasion, movement and attack speed. I was very lucky to get Victario's Flight Ranger boots that do all of that good stuff that I can dream of, giving me dexterity, massive increase to evasion and movement speed along with other good things. I also have Ash Rand, which is not amazing for this build, but it adds fire damage to my Shrapnel Ballista totems, because why not, right? And it increases my fire resistance and evasion massively, while also increasing physical damage output with ranged weapons, so once again, why not? My helmet is another opportunistic rather than optimized choice of a unique for the slot, which gives a massive accuracy increase as well as armor and evasion, plus lightning resistance and movement speed. I say yes please. Flasks are really basic in my case for now, just health and mana plus sulfur flask that boosts my damage output when I really need to pack that extra punch. Speaking of passive skill tree, we start as a ranger and unsurprisingly go to the right edge of the tree first, boosting our projectiles and attack damage, taking survivalist node on the way, and then major nodes, acrobatics and phase acrobatics, to make sure that we live long enough to fire off a few of those deadly arrows. As we used to say in the good old World of Warcraft raiding days, dead DPS does no DPS. Remember this if you're new to playing these kinds of games. You might do less damage with these skill choices, but you will live to do any damage, which is better than nothing, right? From there we go down and boost our damage with bows, taking Master Fletcher. Arguably, you could also hang around here at this part of the tree a little bit longer and take the other bow damage increasing skills, such as King of the Hill. But my problem here is that we don't rely on damage over time effects with this particular build. We rely on the lightning damage. So spending points in these nodes while boosting some of the bow damage it doesn't give you enough of the bang for your buck. That's better spent elsewhere, I would argue. Going back towards the upper parts of my passive skill tree choices, I would take Revenge of the Hunted and Forces of Nature. Then heading up to the cluster of Shocking Strikes, which I've already mentioned a little bit earlier in the video. It appears to be our only way to explicitly boost lightning damage output for a bow-wielding class. Unless I'm massively missing something else, please let me know if I do in the comments down below. I went a little further up on the way to Resourcefulness and increasing my evasion rating a little bit further. Finally, we head back down to the lower segments of the passive skill tree, past the Heart of Oak, Finesse, Quick Step, and kinda aiming to take Wind Dancer as one of the key nodes in this area. I am planning currently to take Graceful Assault and the Freedom of Movement next to Wind Dancer, continuing to look for any bow damage increases and boosting my evasion, life, and elemental resistances if I can and wherever I can. Hopefully this overview gives you a good idea of my passive skill tree journey so far and the intended direction for this build that you can project for yourselves. Now, Ascendancy, my choice is Deadeye, as the two other Ascendancy choices frankly didn't suit this playstyle at all. The first go through the labyrinth, the first 2 points will go into taking Occupying Force to increase the number of Mirage Archers. I find this node powerful, but making the gameplay a little more jerky and fatiguing, if I'm honest. Having a couple of extra Mirage Archers that keep pelting the area with arrows is fantastic, but because you can't summon them right next to each other, you can't just stand there, you have to shoot and move, shoot and move. So in many cases I just feel lazy, and this approach tires me out fairly quickly, but it might not bother you at all. I'm just mentioning it to you to keep your expectations straight. So the right way to play this is to shoot a couple of volleys and dash, then shoot more and dash, and shoot and dash. This contributes to your survival, since you need to stay on the move if you want to live, and it makes your Ascendancy choice and Mirage Archers work as intended. If you don't play like this, A, you might die quicker than you'd like to, and B, you'll most certainly be losing on some substantial extra damage output from Mirage Archers. Second, go through the labyrinth around level 55. Your second 2 points will go into Endless Munitions, which is a very boring skill, but its benefit of firing 2 extra projectiles is kinda undeniable. Finally, let me address the elephant in the room, Ricochet skill choice. Unless I am mistaken, please tell me if I am. My research shows that Ricochet does not work with AoE volley-like skills, such as Rain of Arrows or Storm Rain, because the arrows fall from the sky vertically. The confusion comes from the fact that projectiles sticking into the ground kinda collide with the terrain, right? Hence, having a chance to chain if we trust the skill's description, but they do not. I've checked it, and yes, I had to spend 10 refund points to go back away from Ricochet in favor of other Ascendancy skill choices here. So to wrap up this build overview, my final thoughts. I do believe that it's a fun build, and I think you should give it a try. I think Storm Rain has a lot of potential as a skill. For a ranger class that is surrounded by damage over time boosting passive skill tree choices rather than elemental damage boosting ones, it does feel like you're gimping yourself a little bit though, well, maybe even not a little bit, but quite massively, by sticking with Storm Rain, instead of taking something more basic, boring, but also a lot more potent, and supported by the passive skills such as Toxic Rain. I basically don't think that Grinding Gear Games thought this skill choice through thoroughly enough to offer us a fully legit and fully supported alternative of a main attack skill for a ranged class like Deadeye Ranger, when nothing really in Ascendancy is supporting it directly, other than Mirage Archer, obviously. And while Shocking Strikes remains realistically the only passive skill tree node reachable by us and directly boosting our lightning damage. This is it, my friends. That's the build in progress for you. I hope you enjoyed this video and will still try the build out. Maybe you can make it better. I always trust that my people can do it better than I can. Let me know how you go and if you've made some different choices that worked better for you compared to what I've shown you today. And we'll be speaking again in a few days' time about something else, Path of Exile related or Final Fantasy XIV related, in the builds areas, in the casual adventures areas, in other kind of things. If all of that sounds like your cup of tea and you have not subscribed yet, why not subscribe now? You can always unsubscribe later if you don't like the content that I produce. But I do appreciate your support. I appreciate every like, and I reply to every non-trolley comment. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I'll be speaking with you again very soon. Bye for now.